Dust hangs in the air as the recovery helicopter fights to stay on station, its rotor wash pushing grit across the improvised sandbag lines. The Marine sergeant holds the outer ring, her gloved hand tightening the sling as she scans a scrub field that narrows to under 100 yards of visibility. 2 Air Force aircrew are still missing, and higher headquarters issues the order to abandon the search even as movement builds along the ridgeline. She does not argue. She records, assesses, and reports. But the ground picture is deteriorating fast. Visibility drops under 100 yards. Thermal silhouettes shift across uneven terrain, creeping closer yard by yard. Radio hiss cuts through her headset, masking fragments of the recovery team leader's call. Sandbags slump as the wind shifts, the perimeter thinning at the exact moment she needs it firm. Signal integrity falls off again. The helicopter crew reports fuel time reaching the edge of their window. If they break station now, the search ends. If the perimeter collapses, hostile forces reach the wreck and its sensitive components before the team can extract. Fuel time reaches the edge of the window. Her Marines hold discipline, eyes locked down the arcs, no one raising their voice. She relays updates up the chain, calm and precise. Perimeter control is slipping on the north arc. Thermal returns ripple again, closer, slower, deliberate. Crash site perimeter collapsing. The radio hisses once more, and the silhouettes advance another few yards through the dust as the moment tilts toward the break. Dust ripples under the helicopter's rotor wash as the recovery team shifts positions around the wreck. A headlamp beam cuts through the particulate, catching on a half-buried beacon casing that no one has verified yet. The Marine sergeant holds her sector, answering to the recovery team lead, while higher headquarters maintains authority to order disengagement. A short encrypted radio beep marks the next update moving up the chain. Signal integrity drops again. Before we continue, fuel time tightens on the aircraft overhead. If you want the full picture of how this decision unfolds, subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you're listening from at this moment. Dust settles unevenly across the scrub as morning heat builds over the downed aircraft. The blackened fuselage rests 200 yards from a line of dense cover, its metal ticking softly as it cools. Heat shimmer rises from scorched soil, bending the air above the wreck. Wind drags, particulate, across unstable footing, while rotor wash from the recovery helicopter shifts dust patterns without warning. The Marine sergeant stands at the outer arc, coordinating perimeter sectors, while Air Force personnel sweep debris under a tightening fuel window. She answers to the on-site Air Force recovery lead, who in turn reports to higher headquarters. Command retains authority to declare the eject sequence non-survivable and drive an immediate extraction. She maintains calm posture, focused on evidence, aware that 2 missing pilots depend on ground truth, not assumption. Visibility falls under 100 yards. Chem lights mark arcs across the perimeter, glowing faintly in low light as helmet-mounted lamps sweep across debris fields. The cooling aircraft releases short metallic clicks that merge with the distant thump of rotor blades overhead. Dust rolls off the shattered wings, tugged by intermittent gusts. Air Force specialists kneel near a fractured panel, cross-checking serial markers against their tablet while another technician displays fuel state trending downward. The sergeant checks each sector with disciplined cadence, confirming fields of fire, identifying weak points where sandbags slip in the shifting wind, and directing Marines to reinforce gaps quietly. No one raises their voice. Subordinates report up. Seniors issue orders with precision. The hierarchy remains intact even under strain. Fuel time narrows to minutes. Smoke continues to drift upward, carrying the burnt odor of composite material into rising heat. The sergeant watches the 200 yards of open ground between the wreck and scrub cover, noting movement patterns in the dust where wind carves shallow channels. Air Force recovery personnel trace the blast pattern, mapping likely ejection vectors, while higher headquarters publishes another note labeling the sequence likely non-survivable. The sergeant acknowledges the assessment but continues verifying physical indicators. She has seen high-energy impacts misinterpreted before. She maintains her process, refusing to let urgency compress accuracy. Signal integrity from the perimeter drops again. Heat shimmer obscures the far ridgeline, making shapes difficult to resolve. The sergeant directs a Marine to reseat a loose IR strobe, marking a boundary point. Rotor wash presses dust sideways, reducing visibility along the southern arc. The recovery lead steps over fused metal fragments while reading updates from headquarters displayed on a tablet, their glow reflecting across his gloves. He relays extraction pressure, citing the narrowing window for the helicopter to maintain station. She listens, records, and provides perimeter status without argument. Her role is clarity, not defiance. Wind shifts and reduces stability on the southern arc. The directional drag line formed by snapped branches draws her attention near the edge of scrub cover. It points toward an ejection path that does not match the projected trajectory reported from overhead telemetry. She documents the line in her notes, marking its bearing and distance aloud. Air Force personnel continue collecting fragments and tagging them for later analysis, though fuel concerns accelerate each step. The sergeant feels dust shove lightly against her plate carrier as the helicopter repositions. She knows the margin for a complete search is shrinking. Recovery window tightening. Heat waves distort her view of Marines adjusting their posture at the perimeter. The Air Force recovery lead signals another update. Higher headquarters is preparing to restrict ground movement due to fuel limitations. The sergeant notes the implications. If movement stops now, the dragline she observed, and the unanswered question it represents, will remain unexamined. She tightens her sling and moves along the perimeter, scanning for additional indicators while maintaining disciplined spacing. Another faint metallic tick sounds from the wreck as cooling continues. Visibility tightens further as dust lifts from a new gust. The mission picture contracts. 2 missing aircrew, a wreck with sensitive components exposed, a recovery helicopter nearing its limit, a command inclination to disengage. The sergeant keeps all variables aligned in her reporting, ensuring the recovery lead receives unfiltered perimeter data before sending it up the chain. She understands responsibility rests on documented fact, not assumption. She pauses beside a scorched section of soil where impact heat fused gravel into glassy fragments. The pattern indicates lateral force inconsistent with an immediate fatal outcome. She logs the observation calmly, knowing it challenges the prevailing assumption from headquarters. Dust lifts again as rotor wash sweeps across the zone, forcing her to narrow her stance for stability. She prepares to brief the recovery lead, aware that the next directive from above will determine whether evidence is examined or ignored. Dust slides across the outer sandbag line as the wind shifts again, carrying grit through shallow breaks in the perimeter. The Marine sergeant stands at the forward arc, eyes fixed on scrub terrain that rises unevenly toward a narrow ridge 200 yards out. Movement touches the edge of visibility. Quiet, deliberate, testing her sectors. She tracks each shift of dust that reveals a footfall or a displaced branch. Air Force recovery personnel behind her work against a shrinking fuel window as the helicopter overhead pushes strained engine noise into the morning air. Every minute matters. Fuel time compresses toward the minimum window. The sergeant holds her position, giving short, clear directions to Marines, adjusting IR strobes along the boundary. Rotor wash pulls dust backward, flattening visibility across the scrub and forcing her to narrow her stance. Metallic pings echo from stressed sections of the wreckage behind her, each one carrying the reminder that the crash has destabilized the terrain around them. She keeps her reports calm and factual as she relays perimeter status to the Air Force recovery lead. He acknowledges, then passes the information to higher headquarters. Both operate under U.S. authority, and every exchange reflects it. No raised voices, no theatrics, only disciplined communication. Visibility drops under 100 yards. The scrub line masks movement, making silhouettes appear and vanish as the light shifts. Dust lifts from the ridge as if brushed by a passing shape. But she waits for confirmation, refusing to respond to shadows alone. A Marine down the line signals a disturbance in the northern arc. She moves quickly but controlled, her gear pulling at her shoulders with each step. Wind pushes grit across the sandbags, forcing two Marines to reinforce a slipping stack. The helicopter overhead adjusts its hold, the engine noise tightening as fuel burns down. Signal strength from the north arc degrades again. Higher headquarters issues another disengage order, citing the non-survivable eject assessment and the limited fuel remaining on station. The Air Force recovery lead relays the directive with steady tone, emphasizing the need for rapid extraction. The sergeant acknowledges the order but continues documenting ground truth. She scans the southern arc and watches a shift in dust that suggests a probing movement just beyond a cluster of brush. She marks direction and estimated distance allowed, ensuring the record is clear. Perimeter control loosens as wind shifts. Incoming probing fire snaps past the forward arc, single rounds striking metal fragments of the wreckage, sending sharp metallic impacts across the site. Marines crouch behind sandbags without breaking discipline, maintaining arcs and reporting contact points. The sergeant updates the recovery lead with concise detail, direction, approximate range, and frequency. The helicopter overhead dips slightly as if adjusting for a new hold pattern, its rotor noise becoming increasingly strained. Command channel cuts out for several seconds. She moves toward the scrub line, careful to stay within cover. The ground here holds more residual heat from the crash, and dust rises around her boots. As she kneels to check for indicators of movement, her gloved hand brushes against something firm beneath loose soil. She clears debris with deliberate motions. A fragment of hardened casing emerges, curved, metallic, unmistakable. She turns it over, and warmth presses through her glove. It is a section of an emergency locator beacon. The casing should be cold by now. It is not. Fuel time tightens to critical margin. Dirt settles under her fingernails as she lifts the fragment for confirmation. The residual warmth can only mean one thing. Recent activation. Someone tried to signal. Someone was here after the ejection. She checks the ground around the fragment and finds a shallow disturbance trailing toward thicker brush. Small, but visible. She documents its direction and notes the approximate distance of 20 yards before it disappears into scrub cover. Air Force personnel continue to tag debris behind her, unaware of what she's holding. Visibility compresses further as dust sweeps across the forward arc. She informs the recovery lead of the find in calm, exact language. He pauses, weighing the discovery against the pressure coming from higher headquarters. His radio hisses as he requests clarification on the disengage directive. The helicopter overhead provides another update on fuel. Minutes remaining. No more. The sergeant waits for the answer from higher headquarters, the warm casing still in her hand, knowing this is the first hard evidence contradicting the order to abandon the missing pilots. Signal return from the southern arc fluctuates. She kneels again and rechecks the soil disturbance. It is not an animal track. The spacing is uneven, consistent with someone moving while injured or disoriented. Her breathing stays steady as she calls in the observation. Behind her. A Marine adjusts an IR strobe marking the perimeter boundary. The shifting wind pushes grit against her plate carrier as she stands. She feels its weight settle as she realigns her posture. Fuel, window, drops to final minutes. Higher headquarters repeats the call for disengagement, citing fuel constraints and the continued hostile pressure around the perimeter. The recovery lead responds with professional restraint, but includes a report. The beacon fragment, the warmth, the directional disturbance in the soil. The sergeant listens, knowing the next decision may end the search. Incoming probing fire increases slightly, striking a metal panel and sending another sharp ring across the site. Communication clarity wavers as static grows. She steps back from the scrub line and looks again at the fragment in her hand. The warm metal contradicts every assumption from headquarters. The sergeant turns toward her Marines, checking arcs, ensuring spacing remains correct. IR strobes pulse steadily in the moving dust. She logs her observations with exact detail: bearing, distance, object description, temperature, soil disruption, creating a factual record that cannot be dismissed. Perimeter stability declines with each wind shift. The helicopter makes a wide orbit, straining to maintain altitude as fuel time narrows. Air Force personnel hurry to consolidate debris samples and sensitive components. The recovery lead attempts to raise headquarters again for guidance. The sergeant uses the brief pause to double-check the ground near the drag line. She notices a second disturbance, a faint scuff in the dirt that aligns with the first. She records it immediately. Signal consistency on the command net drops again. She makes her case to the recovery lead. The evidence is real. The trail exists. The missing aircrew may still be alive. Her calm tone does not waver. Her responsibility is accuracy, not interpretation. Dust swirls around her as she holds the fragment up to the light, showing its heat sheen. Behind her, Marines reinforce sandbags along the forward arc as the wind continues shifting. Evidence contradicts the order. The recovery lead takes a long breath before transmitting the new data upward. The helicopter issues another fuel warning. The perimeter trembles at the edge of control. The sergeant prepares her next report, watching the scrub line for additional movement. The situation can hold for one more moment. Exactly one. She feels the air change, the wind angle shift, and the dust lift in a way that tells her they are now at the boundary between holding and losing the perimeter. The next second will decide which way it breaks, but it has not broken yet. Smoke drifts low across the crash site as wind moves through the scrub, carrying fine dust over cooling metal that ticks in irregular intervals. The Marine sergeant kneels beside the debris where the emergency beacon fragments were recovered. She works in calm sequence: confirm thermal residue, photograph the evidence, document temperature variance, and tag coordinates with exact grid reference. Each step forms a packet that will travel up the chain without ambiguity. This is the moment where procedure holds the line. Command channel stabilizes for the first time in minutes. She hands the tablet to the Air Force recovery lead. The display shows the geotag pulsing red against the terrain map, each pulse marking the location of verified residue. He transmits the packet to higher headquarters with a short, clear statement: evidence present, ground truth updated, re-evaluation required. Dust sweeps through the perimeter as the helicopter overhead eases into a departure turn, its rotor wash pressing grit against exposed surfaces. Fuel margin falls below the planned minimum. The recovery lead watches for acknowledgement while maintaining operational posture. The sergeant logs her actions, verifying that each image, coordinate, and description is captured in the internal record. Smoke rises from a ruptured panel 20 yards behind her, carried upward before flattening under shifting wind. A loose piece of debris rolls across uneven ground, tapping lightly against the damaged fuselage. She pauses only long enough to ensure nothing in the evidence chain can be misinterpreted. Signal clarity on her transmission improves. The radio handset at the sergeant's side vibrates with incoming traffic. She steadies it with her gloved hand and listens as higher headquarters requests repeat confirmation of thermal levels. She answers in the same tone she uses for perimeter reports: direct, traceable, accountable. She states the temperature variance aloud and references the photographic record. The helicopter's engine note wavers overhead as the pilot calculates whether remaining fuel allows even a single additional pass. Thermal residue registers above ambient levels again. The wind shifts, pulling dust toward the northern arc, and with it comes increased noise from the perimeter as Marines adjust positions. The recovery lead signals her to stand by while he updates headquarters. The sergeant positions herself behind a section of fragmented wing to block rotor-driven dust while keeping visual on the scrub line. Incoming, static, crackles. Then, clears enough for instructions to break through. Perimeter noise increases as wind shifts. A tone, burst from encrypted radio traffic cuts across the site, sharp and unmistakable. Higher headquarters acknowledges the evidence packet and requests additional confirmation that the debris temperature is still elevated above ambient readings. The sergeant repeats the measurement calmly. She states that the residue's profile is inconsistent with long-expired activation and that the ground disturbance aligns with recent movement. No assumptions, no conclusions, only documented fact. Command routing stabilizes across all channels. The helicopter begins banking back toward the perimeter, its rotor wash cresting over the site and pushing a wave of dust across the sandbags. The pilot announces fuel constraints but states readiness to hold if headquarters directs continuation. The sergeant notes that statement in real time. She monitors the perimeter while the recovery lead relays one final summary to headquarters. Verified residue, directional ground disturbance, time-sensitive indicators. Fuel window narrows to a critical edge. Silence follows, long enough that the sergeant checks signal integrity again. Marines maintain arcs with steady discipline. Dust swirls between chem lights and scattered debris. A twisted panel shifts in the wind and taps once more against the fuselage. Then headquarters breaks silence with a single directive to the recovery lead. He listens, nods once, and turns toward her. Reversal. Search continues. Rotor wash builds as the helicopter swings back onto station, committing to support despite the tight fuel state. The sergeant acknowledges the updated order and begins repositioning Marines to reinforce the forward arcs. She logs the reversal in her record, ensuring the chain of accountability is preserved. The evidence has moved upward, and with it, responsibility has shifted. Signal return holds steady as transmissions align across the network. The recovery lead confirms that the abort call is withdrawn. The search recommences under documented justification, and the perimeter adjusts to support renewed ground movement. The sergeant updates her log with the exact time the decision changed, the evidence that drove it, and the authority that issued the new directive. The threat is now contained enough to proceed, and the accountability trigger is formally engaged. She concludes the entry with a final, factual notation. The search is authorized, and higher headquarters now owns the decision moving forward. Early sun reaches the recovery zone and lays a clean line of light across the perimeter. The Marine sergeant stands inside that line, her field notebook open under a red lens, each coordinate and timestamp recorded with deliberate precision. Wind moves through the scrub and presses softly against her gear. Dust settles over the cooling wreckage as the recovery team prepares for another pass. Nothing in her posture signals defiance. Everything in her process signals duty. Perimeter. Positions settle as visibility improves. She speaks in calm, exact terms when updating the Air Force recovery lead. Each detail she reports, thermal variance, ground disturbance, residue levels, is anchored to evidence she personally confirmed. She does not push opinion. She does not frame conclusions. She moves information upward in the chain of command with the confidence that accuracy is its own obligation. Nearby, Marines maintain disciplined arcs, their movements measured, their spacing consistent, the early light strengthening around them. Command channel remains stable for the moment. A soft radio click marks the arrival of another update. The sergeant listens, logs the message, and continues her documentation without hesitation. The recovery helicopter idles in the distance, rotor movement low and steady as the crew rechecks fuel planning. The operational picture is clearer now. The perimeter steadies, visibility rises, and the evidence she preserved establishes a factual pathway for headquarters to follow. Her contribution is not force or resistance. It is clarity, duty over ease. She closes her notebook with a controlled motion, ensuring the red lens markings remain visible for the next reference. The wind shifts again, carrying the faint smell of scorched soil. but the line she holds is now defined by established truth rather than speculation. Her actions keep the mission anchored to what actually happened, not to what was assumed, and as operations continue, the integrity of that record becomes the foundation that sustains every decision still ahead. The scrub stretches wide under fading daylight, edges of the perimeter marked by quiet arcs that extend several hundred yards across uneven ground. Dust settles as the recovery element repositions, and a low aircraft rumble moves across the terrain before slipping into distance. The Marine Sergeant closes her field notebook, her posture steady, her reporting complete. The decision now rests in the contrast between two lawful options. Visibility across the scrub drops under 100 yards. Headquarters holds the authority to order an immediate pullout, ending the search before the last traces are confirmed. Ground personnel, however, understand that unverified evidence can determine whether missing aircrew live or die. One path prioritizes rapid extraction under uncertainty. The other holds the perimeter long enough to confirm every trace before withdrawing. What would you do? Tell us directly. Pull out on headquarters order, or hold the line long enough to verify the final evidence. State your choice in the comments. Dust settles across the stabilized perimeter as the helicopter lifts away, its rotor wash fading into quiet wind. Long shadows form over the crash site, and the Marine Sergeant stands steady beneath the weight of her gear, posture controlled, documenting what remains. This operation now moves into record, actions traced, decisions owned, and responsibilities clearly defined. Wind settles over the debris field. The slowing blades overhead mark closure on this phase, not the end of the work. Each detail preserved here becomes part of a broader chain of command understanding. How the perimeter held, how evidence moved, how accountability stayed intact. The environment calms, but the requirement to report accurately and continue forward does not. Next mission ready. These events stand recorded, and the process continues beyond this frame, carried by the same discipline that brought the team through this perimeter hold. If you value clear ground truth and documented action, stay with us. Like and subscribe, because the next mission is already waiting.